But once again, this reviewer is stating something like in a factual manner that's just not true. Like, welcome back. It's time to spice things up a little bit and go over some Baldur's Gate 3 Early Access 1-star reviews. Now, I've done a few videos like this in the past for Baldur's Gate and also a few other games, and I really enjoy doing them, and it seems to get a lot of interaction, and of course everybody is very opinionated, so I don't even know if I'm going to be looking at the comment section for this video for my own mental health. With that said, I'm going to dive right in anyways. Now, I put a lot of time into early access, probably over 900 something hours up to this point between multiple different platforms, Steam, GOG, and Stadia, and I've been following the development cycle very, very closely. I even got to go to Larian Studios for the panel from Hell 5th Edition, so am I biased towards liking this game? Yes, but I can recognize that, and I try to pull myself back a little bit and see things as objectively as I possibly can. I'm always going to stay a little bit more on the optimistic side, while somebody else might be a little bit more pessimistic, but that's okay. The most important thing is that we see what is an actual opinion and what is objectively wrong. So let's jump right in. Now, the first thing I want to point out here is that out of all the Steam reviews, since Early Access came out October 6th of 2020, it's been over 2 years, it's very positive for 49,167 reviews, and for recent reviews, it's mostly positive. Now, the Early Access stage for this game has been kind of big, as it sold, or it was reported to have sold over 1 million copies on Steam alone after the first week, so back in October of 2020. So when the game comes out, I expect this to be really, really big, so we're going to have a lot of reviews to go over then, and I'm excited. So let's jump right into the mostly positive recent reviews and try to find the thumbs down. Now, I did clickbait you guys a little bit because I'm not going over 1-star reviews. I was planning on it, but there's no recent Google reviews for me to do that, and I only want to go over recent reviews, so the thumbs down is going to have to do. Now, taking a look at the first negative review, it starts off by saying no major updates in months. If you've been following Early Access, pretty much every patch since patch 3-ish, it's been around a 3.5 to 4.5 month wait period for each major update. The last patch, patch 8, was released on July 7th, so November 7th would mark the 4-month mark, so we're not even really out of that period yet. I think it's probably fair to criticize Larian's formula for early access, I guess you could say, but the way this is worded, it makes it seem like they expected like a big patch like every month, but that Larian hasn't done that pretty much at all since patch 3, which was still in 2020. So for the past 2 years, it's been about 3.5 to 4.5 month wait. So to be expected for the future patches as well. Next sentence says early access for over 2 years. And you know what? I totally understand your frustration. If you bought the game 2 years ago and you still haven't seen the final product, that kind of sucks. I understand. With that said, Larian Studios has never given a release date for an official release date until February of this year, when they gave us an official release year of 2023, which they seem to be committed to. So everyone that bought early access bought not knowing when the release date was going to be, taking into account the pandemic and then of course war going on, both events which have affected Larian Studios. I think we can probably be a little bit lenient with how long early access should be, but the number itself is going to be subjective. So some people are really frustrated now. Totally understand that frustration. Personally, all I care is that the end product ends up being the really high quality, good product that they're claiming that it's going to be. That's what matters to me, so I'm okay with it, but I totally understand player frustration. Don't waste your money until the game comes out. Now, I think actually a lot of people could follow this advice, minus a couple of the chosen words here, but I think a lot of people should wait until the game comes out. You don't have to FOMO into early access. There's a lot of people already playing it. We've been given a lot of good feedback, and I think it's okay to wait for the full release. In fact, a lot of you guys are going to have a better experience as you go in, blind into the experience. You don't have any spoilers or anything like that, unless you've been watching my videos, if it ever comes out. So I'm not sure if this player is aware, but it was announced to come out in 2023. Will Larian delay it? No idea. Seems like, according to what Sven has said, that they are in a good state right now, and they're entering the polishing phase. So I can't imagine them being in the polishing phase into 2024. So I do firmly believe that it will be coming out in 2023. All right, let's scroll down and find the next negative review. And this one was posted on October 4th. 2 years as of October 6th in early access while selling the game at full price. So I understand this frustration, absolutely. And I also think that most people probably shouldn't participate in early access. The practice itself has been used and abused by so many companies in the past that it's hard to support it at all. And I understand that. But at the same time, if you trust a company, early access can be used for good. And I think a lot of people do trust Larian, and they love Larian for their previous games like the Divinity series, and they genuinely wanted to participate in it. They wanted to pre-order the game while essentially getting access to a demo or early access phase. Ultimately, what matters is that Larian puts out the product that they're advertising, a high quality CRPG. And if they do that, then all this early access stuff doesn't really matter at all because they used it for good. Only Act 1 available, and even after 2 years, that's not finished. Max level has been 4 for 2 years. A lot of people seem to be under this idea that because they don't see the entire game right now in early access, that the company hasn't been working on that content. Larian Studios is a company, I think they're over 400 employees right now, and I would guess that the vast majority of the company has been working on content outside of early access while we were playing early access. So the company is always working on the game in its entirety, but they're intentionally withholding things from us, like level 5, level 6, some of the classes we haven't seen yet, and obviously Act 2 and 3, we knew that we were not going to get them in early access at all because Larian doesn't want to release their entire game in early access and have all that all over the internet and spoiled, which would kind of ruin the actual official release. So just know that if you don't see something in early access, it's probably being intentionally held back for many different reasons. Don't waste your money, wait for release, and even then read reviews after it comes out. I generally agree with that sentence. I think most people should probably wait and then look at reviews for pretty much every game. Edit for clarity. No, they have not provided a release date. Well, they did actually say 2023 earlier this year, and they were strangely completely silent on the 2-year anniversary of early access on October 6th. True, we didn't really get any information. I was hoping for something then as well, with still no further communication on October 20th. So yeah, I think that's just Larian's marketing strategy. Big patches, then silence in between. It could be argued that you'd want them to be a little bit more transparent, but whatever. Ultimately, if the game comes out good, that's really all that I truly care about. Scrolling down, let's try to find some more. A lot of positive reviews. Here we go. Not recommended on September 14th. I have played Larian games in the past and found them highly enjoyable. I have also played both previous Baldur's Gate games. The franchise has a special place for me since moving around so much meant that I often spent many hours on the computer until I made more friends. When Larian put up Baldur's Gate 3 for early access, I purchased it, eager to support the game's development and knowing that I would intend on playing it on full release anyway. Now after all this time, after playing all of Act 1, I can safely say, this is a ripoff, don't buy it. The early access for this game was released in October of 2020. This means it was after the most devastating early months of the pandemic. Not really sure what the point being made here is because the mid months of the pandemic were also really devastating. Late 2020, companies were all on lockdown and this went into 2021. It was just really crazy times. So I don't really know how much weight this really stands just because early access was released in October. Instead of March or something like that. It was just a really crappy year for everyone, and 2021 was as well. Also, we can't forget that the early months of the pandemic, early access wasn't out, but Larian Studios was still a company and they're still working on the game, and the pandemic had a major effect on all companies. When it was released, it was advertised as being over 50% completed and slated for a late 2021 release date. Well, I know that's not true. It wasn't slated for a late 2021 release date, so I'm not sure where this reviewer gets their information. And as far as being over 50% completed when it was released as early access, I don't recall ever reading or hearing that. Now, I don't factually know, but I don't think that was true. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments, but make sure to provide proof. But I know that there was never an official late 2021 release date. The most official release date that we got was earlier this year in February when Larian gave us the official release year, 2023. I laughed knowing that it meant it would be 2022 at the latest and purchased it anyway. I actually thought it was going to be 2022, maybe the end of 2022 at the latest myself, so I understand this. I guess our reasonings are just a little bit different because this reviewer is under the premise of false release dates. If it's playable and that close to completion, I'll just have to wait a bit. However, over the past 2 years of development, we have seen goalposts moved at every stage. New features are constantly being added to the development cycle, features that were not originally advertised by the developer. This also confuses me a little bit because that's like the whole point of early access, like adding new features and changing other features. I don't know what the point of saying this is. It's kind of just demonstrating a lack of understanding of what game development is and what early access is in relation to game development. While there was a statement by Larian in which they indicated that they intended on including all D&D 5e classes, yep, they did make that statement, and races, it was made clear that the priority was to finish the game's story first and add these features in later. I also don't recall it being made clear that the priority was to finish the game's story and add these features in later. As someone who has been following the development of this game like a hawk since before early access, we were always talking about these D&D 5e features and what was going to be included in early access and how we're going to mess with them, and Larian was talking about what they were going to release and stuff like that. So I don't know where all this information is coming from, and it's presented to us in like a factual manner, which is what bothers me a little bit about this review. That is not what has transpired. 2 years of constantly adding new races, classes, skills, side quests, romance options, anything other than actual development of the principal game. So I'm trying to figure out what the principal game is in this reviewer's mind. Every new feature has been great. No, really, I cannot in good faith say that these features were bad, but they are a distraction from what is important. So hopefully this reviewer explains to us what's important and what the principle of the game is. Because if they don't tell us what that is in their mind, there's really nothing to talk about here. If this person is referring to the story as the principle of the game, I think they misunderstand what early access is mainly for. It's for testing features and mechanics, all of the D&D features that you talked about earlier. We're not really testing the story, so to say, as we only experience an unfinished Act 1. There's no resolutions to any of the important quests, and we won't know how the story plays out or how those quests finish until the game actually comes out. And now yet again, with no release date and the window being moved to 2023, no development roadmap, no transparency, and the devs clarifying early access will never see more than the first 4 levels of character progression. Oh, there's so much, hold on, there's so much to take in here. No development roadmap. I mean, yeah, I guess that's partially true, depending on how you look at it. No transparency. In between patches, yeah, there hasn't really been any transparency, but the patches themselves, that we get a ton of information during all the panel from hells. I don't know about this. The devs clarifying that early access will never see more than the first 4 levels of character progression. When have the devs ever clarified that? In fact, I recall Sven saying in a previous panel from hell that we might even see level 5 if we ask for it enough or something along those lines. Now this could end up being true where we don't see more than the first 4 levels of character progression, but once again this reviewer is stating something like in a factual manner that's just not true. Like, it was never like officially presented or stated to us that we're not going to see more than the first 4 levels, even if it turns out to be true. Just, it kind of affects the credibility of this review a little bit. And an incomplete Act 1. So yeah, we knew that we're going to have an incomplete Act 1. That is true. The same good faith that stops me from claiming the game is of poor quality also pushes me to say that this game is a waste of money. This next paragraph talks about negative threads and comments being mass deleted. And I don't know anything about this, so I can't even speak on it. I have no idea. Unfortunately, this review is just really not that credible because they got a lot of things factually wrong, and they stated it as a fact, as a, this is what the devs said, as opposed to, and I think they may have said this, or I got the impression that this was going to be the case. The language used in this review just makes me not really be able to take any of it seriously. And unfortunately, 1,500 people found this review helpful. I think there's a way that these points could have been laid out that made much more sense, that were much more subjective in their nature, but unfortunately this is just not really a good review. Now, you guys probably have noticed by now, a lot of the negative reviews that I've gone over don't really talk about like the game mechanics themselves. Like, I don't like how this works in the game, the turn-based combat's too slow, which is really unfortunate because I was hoping to talk about that, but nobody's really talking about that now because everybody's probably just sick of early access right now and they're waiting for the official release. Devs are too busy playing this game rather than working on it. The wives of the man-children at Larian have left them. There's no hope for them, and there's no hope for this game to be released in 2023. Nice. In all honesty, I can't recommend this game. There's all this build up to getting rid of the parasite, but the early access ends without being able to finish this supposedly early part of the game. Well, the parasite being in your brain's a pretty major part of the game. We don't really know like when that quest is going to come to a resolution. So, I mean, if you're criticizing early access itself, saying like if early access was its own game and the stories within early access don't come to their resolutions, okay, I guess that makes sense, but this is unfinished Act 1, so most people buying this knew that, like, especially, like, part of the main story wasn't going to be resolved by the end of their playthrough. There hasn't been an update to this game in a month and a half. Yep, updates are 3.5, usually to 4.5 months, and who knows when there will be another. Well, I mean, according to everything that they've done in the past, probably this month in November. Not sure if that will happen, but this reviewer hasn't really looked into the stages of early access pretty much at all. And I took a quick peek at several of the other recent negative reviews, but there's really no good negative reviews that get really in-depth into the game's mechanics, unfortunately, so we're gonna have to wait until the game officially releases for me to dive into those. There were a lot of other thumbs downs that were saying things like the game has potential, it's just not ready right now, and I think that's perfectly valid. And in the past, there were a lot of negative reviews that I respected, such as D&D 5e rules not being fun in a video game. Like, obviously I don't agree with that, but I can understand that opinion. Some people just don't like the RNG dice mechanics, think the game is a little bit too slow, or they don't like the action system, especially if you come from DOS 2 and you're used to having multiple actions per turn, and now you come to a 5e video game where you only get one action, then a bonus action and a reaction. It can feel a little underwhelming. And also fans of the original franchise that are really hardcore BG1 and 2 fans that are now wanting to play BG3, but they don't like turn-based combat. That also is totally understandable that those players are upset, because the original games were real-time with pause, and now BG3 is, of course, only turn-based. So that's totally understandable. The perspective of those players being angry at their favorite franchise changing something like that, and that's okay for them to feel that way, and I respect that. So yeah, that'll be it for today's video. Wasn't as action-packed as some of these other ones that I've done, but yeah, I'm going to do some more in the future, and if you have any recommendations for other games that you would like me to take a look at, actual 1-star reviews for, let me know below in the comments, and I'll catch you guys soon.